Here's the deal. Sales isn't about pushing harder, talking better, or flooding inboxes. That's noise, not strategy. Real business development? It's about presence, precision, and knowing exactly how the room feels before you open your mouth. Jake Stahl, author of Own the Room, How to Communicate to Be Seen, Heard, and Respected, has spent over 30 years training teams across 6 countries and 47 states, teaching solopreneurs how to turn conversations into conversion. Known as the mind mechanic, people who have been trained by him say he has the uncanny ability to break down human behavior and rebuild it into real, repeatable influence. This is where communication becomes your unfair advantage. Welcome to Own the Room with Jake Stahl.
This week on Own the Room, I am thrilled. As a matter of fact, I was really excited for this conversation. I'm thrilled to introduce Blake Johnson. Blake is a nationally recognized estate planning attorney and the creator of Your Family Bank Method, a legacy-focused framework that helps families build generational wealth with intention, structure, and sustainability. And Blank, I think I'm even more excited to talk about the program you just started yesterday, which is the Entitlement Elimination program. So we're going to get to all of that. But Blake, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jake. Excited to be here.
So Blake, I'm not sure I know a topic that's more important than estate planning, right? We do our work, we do everything right, and then at the end, we take what we have to show for it and we pass it along. So Blake, give me your opening pitch for estate planning and why it's so important.
Oh, there's so many ways we could go with this, but I mean, the reality is that you have a plan, whether you think you've done it or not. The state has decided for you if you're not going to take action, what's going to happen. And so, do you want the state default plan, which is what they think is best, or do you want to do what you think is best for your family? And so, a lot of people say, I want to do what I think is best, but then they never get around to doing it because they don't see the immediate impact of it. And so, that's the hardest thing I have to overcome is everybody knows it's important. They know they should do it. It's a matter of taking that action, getting over that resistance, because it's, oh, death is so far away. I don't want to think about it, you know?
Yeah, and I have to say, Blake, estate sounds like a big word. When I think about what I have and my income and all of those things, I don't think of it like an estate. I think of an estate as like a 40-bedroom mansion on, 100 acres of land. So estate is a big word and it sounds complicated. How easy is it to get this done?
It's pretty straightforward. An estate just really means everything that you own. That's all the estate means. Now, for some people, it might be that 40-bedroom mansion, but for most people, it's not. Your estate is your house, your cars, your bank accounts, retirement accounts, those kind of things. They all need to have a plan of how that's going to be facilitated while you're living and when you pass away. A lot of people think estate planning is only death planning, but that's only part of it. The documents are called a living trust, a living will, because there is so much of it that's part of your plan for while you're living as well as when you pass away.
So tell me what's the piece for when we're living? Because I too think of it like, okay, this is for when I've kicked off and to make sure that everybody gets their money. So what's the living piece of this, Blake?
Well, what about incapacity is the first one that comes up. So if you become incapacitated, who's going to pay your bills, make sure you're taken care of, make your medical decisions, those kind of things. That's the basic part of the living part of your estate plan. And then you have, as your assets grow, you have things like, your asset protection. What do you worry about there? You have estate taxes, you have income tax planning. So there's all these different aspects that can kind of come together, and that works in coordination with your CPA or tax advisor and with your financial planner. And so the three of us typically interact a lot and work together to make sure that the whole picture works.
So this whole estate planning thing requires 3 people. It requires your CPA, your financial planner, and you. Is that accurate, or is that not always the case?
Well, if you want it done the best it can be, for a lot of people just starting out, they may just have little kids, they've got a house, and they want to make sure that with their life insurance money, their kids taken care of. Okay, well then that's something probably I can just handle on the estate planning side, the attorney side. But if you've got other stuff you're looking to grow your wealth, or you're trying to make sure the investments match with what the estate planning or the asset protection plan is, then yeah, we all have to kind of work together. So for the most part, if you're doing it right, those three positions should be talking quite a bit.
Okay. And our audience, Blake, just so you know, is a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, people that are out there flying solo every day trying to make the buck, right? So tell me what the state default method is. Give us kind of the scare side of the story so we know what's going to happen if we don't get involved with you.
Yeah, so each state has their own what's called intestacy laws, which just basically means that you have done no planning. And for most states, if you pass away and you're married and have kids, it's going to be some variation of going, some of it to spouse, some of it to kids. And that part for most people is fine. The problem is we have to go through probate court to make that happen. And with probate court, you're going to pay a bunch of attorney's fees and court costs, and it's going to drag out over a year. We typically say plan on at least 5% of your net worth goes to attorney's fees and court costs. Even, it can be more than that. And it's just this long, drawn out process. And so that's the nightmare part of it. And then if you have minor kids, a court or a judge is deciding who takes your kids as opposed to going to who you think is the best fit for them. So
Oh,
that's like the worst case scenario. You've done nothing. Now everyone says, okay, well, I don't want that. I've seen on TV that people do wills. I'm going to do a will. Okay, will is better than nothing because now you say at least who you want to get your stuff, and you can say in the will who you want to take your kids while they're minors. So you solve those two problems. The bigger issue is, though, a will is nothing more than a letter to the judge that says, hey, judge, when you get this in probate court, this is what I want to have happen. So you're still going to pay all those attorney's fees and court costs, and it's still going to take well over a year. You've just now said what you want the end result to be. And so a will in most cases is not going to be adequate enough. And so that's where a trust or living trust comes in because it can avoid probate because a trust does not die. So the idea is you put all your assets into a trust. So when you pass away, there's nothing in your individual name, so there's nothing to go through court. And then within the trust itself, you can specify not only who gets what, but now we get to be creative. We can say when did they get it, put age restrictions on there or other things. We can say who's in charge over the trust for those individuals, and we can put other restrictions as well. Like, hey, we want you to, go to school, or we want you to be married before you do anything, or we want you to get a prenup before you can get any distributions. Any type of variation on that. The trust is the tool that allows you to do that, whereas a will, you can't do that.
well, Blake, that default method sucks. That sounds terrible.
Yep.
So I would imagine the trust then could get into more complicated scenarios. So let's say somebody who's married a second time and has stepchildren, and they want to leave a larger piece to their biological kids and maybe equal pieces their stepkids. So the trust can address that versus just a will that says A, B, C, and D. Is that right?
You could handle that situation with both a will and a trust, but you would want the trust because you typically have assets from a previous marriage, so you want to keep those separate from the joint assets that you have from the new marriage. And so it just gives a lot more flexibility within the trust because you can see how it's going to play out and you can change it a little bit easier as you're going along.
So I'm going to play ignorant and let's pretend I'm asking for a friend. I always hear that a will's gone into probate. Tell me exactly what that means. What does it mean that a will has gone to a probate court?
So the only way to validate if you just sign a will, that it is not valid until you die. First step is you actually have to die for your will to become valid. And then step two is a probate judge has to validate it as well. They have to see that you have the death certificate, read through it, make sure it has all the requirements as stated in state law. And then they put their official stamp on it and say, okay, this is a valid will now. This is what's going to govern this estate. And so probate is just the fancy word for court proceedings of what to do with someone's estate when they pass away.
Got it. And you said that can take up to a year for that small process to take place.
Well, so that is just part of the probate court process. That's the very first step is you have to first validate the will,
Oh, geez.
and then you have the next step of you have to get a personal representative appointed to handle the estate. And then you have to go through and handle the whole estate, do accountings and sell the assets, do all that stuff. And then the final step is the judge approves the distribution of all those assets to the correct people.
Wow. Boy, this all of a sudden makes me want to just go out and create a trust at this point and do some estate planning. Wow, I had no idea. So, considering the fact that we have a lot of small business owners that now I want to do this, and I think other people should too, what's the best first step to get involved? You said there's like a financial planner and a CPA and an attorney in some of these scenarios. Who do you go to first? How do you even get started?
I mean, you can kind of go in any order. I'm guessing if they're entrepreneurs, they probably already have a CPA that they're working with, or at least some sort of tax preparer, bookkeeper, accountant, something like that. And so what I found is the attorney is usually the last one involved, because the step is typically the tax preparer, then you have the financial advisor, and then one from there, then it typically comes to us. But you can go in any order, doesn't really matter. Because I interact with so many CPAs and financial advisors, I have plenty I can refer to as well on that spectrum. But if you want just the estate planning, do the trust, then you go straight to the attorney. But what I found is people want to go to someone that they know, or that, someone they know trusts. And so that's why I go to your CPA that you already trust, or your financial advisor you already trust. Who do you work with? Who's a good estate planning attorney that I can go to get this done, that your clients or you've worked with personally? And then that's typically how they get introduced to us. So that way you're not having to just go on Google and find someone and hoping that they're good.
Got it. So I'm going to ask the obvious question, which I know a dozen listeners at least are asking in their heads right now. Why not use AI or one of these kits that you buy at like Barnes and Noble and just do it yourself?
um, the AI answer is easy right now. It's not there yet. I do
Got it.
think it will be soon. It's making leaps in its advancement. I try to use it to review trusts, and we have some pretty sophisticated stuff, and it's still making mistakes, but it does help me find things easier and so on. But it's not going to have the full knowledge of you have all this history of the attorney's experience. So that
Right.
one I definitely wouldn't recommend. Just it makes too many mistakes. Now, the kits or the online tools, you have LegalZoom, Trust and Will, Estate Guru, there's a number of those. And full disclosure, I'm on the board for Estate Guru, so I'm
Got
involved
it.
in one of those.
Okay.
Um, those ones are good for if you're just starting out and your estate is pretty simple and straightforward. So, first marriage, all the kids are from that marriage, or you don't have kids, but even, from a previous marriage and second marriage, so very simple, straightforward stuff. That's when those are good. And you're not trying to make, different distributions, because what those are is they are essentially forms saying pick option A, B, or C. And
Oh,
so
gotcha.
if you understand what option A, B, or C are, then, and you're okay with those options, then it can be a good tool for you, because those forms have been vetted. They are, legit trust or legit wills, those kind of things, but you're limited to the scope of what those forms, do. Versus when you go to a practicing attorney like me, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to ask you, okay, what's the relationship with the family? How do the kids interact with each other? How do they interact with you? What about spouses? Okay, what about the kids? Do they have any spendthrift problems? Like, do they just blow money? Drug or alcohol history? Do we have special needs kids? Those things, and that's going to dictate each kid being treated a little bit differently. And so we're going to customize the document more to what those specific needs are. And I can do that, whereas those tools can't. So I can incorporate all the different elements in there to make it a very customized thing to fit what your family needs. So that's the main difference. If you're just starting out and, hey, I need to get something in place because we're going on a trip and this is better than nothing, absolutely. Those things are good. I've seen all the documents for most of those things. Like I said, they're legit. They will work, but you're very limited in the scope of what it does.
Got it. And I will say for the record, I am a person that likes to deal with another person more than I like to deal with a kit. So I would probably come to you versus trying to figure out what forms meant and everything else. To me, it's just worth the extra money.
Yeah.
So Blake, you and I talked a little while ago, and we had some very similar feelings on kids and how to raise kids. And so I would love to touch on the new program that you just started yesterday, December 2nd, which is the Entitlement Elimination program. Tell me a little bit about that. why you started it, and what it's for.
Yeah, so the main concerns that I get over and over again when I meet with clients, it's, hey, I don't want my kids to be spoiled turds and just live off of what I've made. How do I prevent that? And then the second one is, I don't want them to just liquidate the legacy that I built. I have all these businesses, or I have all these rental properties. Like, I don't want them to just liquidate and have cash. So how do I protect those things? So hearing that over and over again, I looked at different options, and we have this estate planning tool called a family bank. And the whole premise is about stewardship, teaching your kids how to be financially, literate while also learning stewardship and responsibility and all that stuff. And that's on a larger scale. And the vast majority of people probably aren't going to be doing that because, it's a 10,000 plus dollar price tag to implement that. And you've got to have a ton of liquid cash that you can give away and not need to implement that program. And so I said, all right, how can I take this and bring it down to the masses, like in these core principles? And that's what the entitlement and elimination program is. It's the intro program. You have kids that you want to teach about money, that you want to teach them how to actually have work ethic, how to, be responsible, have stewardship, not be entitled in the way that they talk to you or around money and all of that stuff. Because the reality is, most business owners, entrepreneurs, they're successful. And so their kids aren't growing up in the same struggle circumstances that they did, which made them work and do well. And so this program helps you manufacture struggle for your kids in different scenarios and helps educate them about financial literacy. So that way they are ready to go into the real world when they leave your home, and they're going to appreciate money. They're going to have that work ethic that you're hoping to instill in them. And it doesn't have to necessarily be that. If you have other values you're worried about, the program can do that. We build it so that you can focus on the things that matter to you. You create the values, and then we help you create the plan on how to implement that down the road. And so that's where it came from. And I'm really passionate about it because I've got two kids with a third one on the way. And, I see my friends or my kids interact with their friends, and it blows my mind with the way some of the things these kids do, with the way their parents just cave to every whim of them, and it's setting up their kids for failure. And so I want to make that impact of helping people know, hey, it's okay to say no to your kids. Like, that's actually a really good thing. You need to set those boundaries, and here's how you can start with it. So we start with the vision. What's the overall values? What's important to you? Go through step by step. Okay, now we have chores, and we have, value creation. And then we have, if you want to do business, here's how you help your kid create a business, and why lending is better than gifting. And we go through all those steps through that program to help people with that.
I love the term you said, manufacture struggle for the kids. So let's talk about that a little bit. I know you just said, you set up different programs, but give me an idea of what that manufacturing struggle looks like.
Yeah, it's my new favorite phrase. Is I say that to my
It's
kids.
catchy.
It is. It's a really good one because, yeah, my kids will never have to struggle financially because of, where we're at. At least I hope so. Anything could happen, but the reality is they probably won't. So I'll give you an example of coming back to my childhood. My dad started as, he was an attorney as well, estate planning attorney, still practicing, and things started to go well, and he decided to go on his own. And things started to go well. He decided to build his own office building. And so when I was growing up, it we weren't hurting by any means, but there wasn't a whole lot of extra because he was putting into the business and growing. So when I turned 14, I got a job. That's just what I wanted to do because I saw, like, hey, I want to go do these things. I'm going to have a job and do that. And I compare that to my younger siblings who, after, I was gone, things were easy for them because my dad had built the success. And so, they didn't have to have the summer job because he said, hey, I want you to go to the sport camps and do these things, all this good intention stuff. And so, they have a slightly different view, or did, because they didn't have to have that struggle as much. And so they're having that now when they're on their own, married with their kids, versus
Right.
I had that growing up. So I feel like a far easier transition for me than it was for them. And, with my kids now, it's okay, how do I create these little moments that they see, hey, you don't need to be entitled. So my son wanted an electric, an e-bike. Well, we lent him the money to buy it. He had to pay it back. We did a whole payment schedule and everything. So he got to feel the weight of debt, which is a whole nother story. It was a great experience there. But one of the things I told him was, hey, when you, as part of this contract of this loan, is you are never allowed to ride this to school because I want you to ride your pedal bike or walk because I am anti the electric scooters, the e-bikes, all that stuff because we're making our kids super lazy. And so he got around that by convincing me that he would use this e-bike to help with his lawn mowing business. He can now pull the lawnmower on a trailer and I don't have to drive him around. I'm like, okay, that's a big plus, but you're still not using it for school. So that's
So
like the
he's a
kind of things I'm talking
negotiator.
about. Like, it's not a big deal for him to ride his pedal bike to school. He still has a bike, but it's
Yeah.
just that little bit of reminder like, hey, you got to be a little bit humble. You don't get to ride your e-bike. You have to actually pedal.
So let me get this straight then. So you help families create these scenarios for their kids to teach them responsibility. Is that what the program does?
Yeah, so it just helps them start generating the ideas for themselves. Like, here's the core principles. I'm a big fan of teaching principles and letting people implement them as they see fit. Like, I don't pretend to have all the answers here. I learn stuff every day from different parents and people that I talk to. And so I've just kind of pulled that cumulative knowledge from talking to lots of wealthy people and seeing the ones that were successful with teaching their kids versus not. And so I got those core principles, and from there, it's how do you want to implement that? For instance, there's going to be differences in each family. I grew up, my parents had a 529 plan for me, so they paid for my tuition. I had to pay for everything else. My wife, on the other hand, came from a family where there wasn't that. And so she had to work her entire summer and all through college to pay for her whole way through school. And so she has a super appreciation for that. We butt heads about how we're going to implement that with our kids.
I'll bet.
Um, and so you have to realize like each whatever I say is not going to work necessarily for your family, but here's a principle. How do you want to implement this? And so that's what we're trying to do is give them the general guidelines and let them decide how to fit it with their kids and their personalities and all those things.
Blake, this is a cool idea, especially in a day and age where sometimes parenting is two parents having a job, they're both working long hours, and you don't always have the time to be able to come up with things like this to teach the kids. And if you're not raised like that, you're less likely to be able to come up with those ideas. So I love this idea. So do you send them a kit? Do you do an interview with them, then create something custom? How does that work?
No, so it's all videos and then downloadable sheets. So it's very, cost effective for them. It's $99 lifetime access for it. And you get all the sheets and all the videos and whatever. Half the videos are just for the parents, and then once we get them established with what they want, then the rest of the videos is, hey, watch this with your kids, have these discussions, and so on. So it's very self-paced, easy to do.
Awesome. And earlier it sounded like you said this didn't always have to do with money. This could have to do with other things as well. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's
Or did
it's
I
all
mishear
about
that?
teaching them the values that are important to them. So if it's more work ethic related, okay, then that's your focus. If it's about teaching integrity, great. Have that be your focus. How can you teach that? Here's some
Gotcha.
scenarios. How did you learn this? And how do bring up those conversations?
And how can people get a hold of this program? Is this through a website right now?
Yeah, so my website is yourfb.com for Your Family Bank, and there's a whole page dedicated to that.
Fantastic. We'll put that in the speaker notes. So anybody who's listening to the episode, please look at the speaker notes for the link to that. So Blake, it sounds like you have a lot going. Is there a book in your future? What else do you have on the back burner right now that you're not telling us?
So I do have a book out. I wrote that early on in my practice. It is called "You Can't Take It With You: The Top 15 Estate Planning Questions Answered in Plain English." So a lot of what we talked about in the beginning of the show about how probate works, what myths are out there. That's what that book is. Um, I know there's a follow up at some point. It's not really not even on my back burner yet. It's still in the fridge. Um, no, my thing right now is really focusing on it was getting this entitlement elimination program off and then focusing more on the family bank and really helping the families make sure their kids are not entitled. That's become my big passion right now is helping implement that because I think if we can teach this principle of lending versus gifting and teaching financial responsibility, it has such a wider impact throughout our communities and our country and so on, that fixes a lot of other problems. So that's kind of where my focus is.
Blake, I love this whole thing. This is fantastic. I'm tempted to enroll. My kids are grown and out of the house. I'm tempted to enroll just to take a look at it. So really cool stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, it really doesn't. If you're going to have grandkids, you can apply the same principles to teaching your
Good point.
grandkids, to making sure that they understand those things. And as you and I have talked about before, you're never done parenting your kids.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So, Blake, one thing I love to ask my guests, and you just started to address it with the book. So, you opened this door, we're going to walk through it. You said about myths that are out there. What are the top couple of myths that you hear all the time about estate planning that you just would like to destroy for us right here?
The first one is that I have a will and that's enough. And as we talked about earlier, all a will does is guarantee that you go through probate court. So that's the first one. Another one is that when I die, the government's going to take all my money. And the reality is, estate taxes don't kick in until you're over, 14 million for 2025. Next year, it'll jump up to 15 million, and that's per person. So if you're a married couple, it's 30 million before you have to worry about estate taxes. So not really an issue anymore. It was, early 2000s, but that's a big myth out there. And then the third one is that trusts are only for the super wealthy. We think about that, trust fund kids and all that stuff. That does happen from super wealthy, but the reality is, if you own a home in almost every state, if not every state, you're gonna have to go through probate court, regardless of what the value of that equity in that house is. And so the way you avoid that is through a trust. So the vast majority of people do need a trust as part of their estate plan. They just don't need it for the estate tax planning.
Wow, I feel like I just went through an episode of Scared Straight. I'm going to go out and get my estate planning in order after this. So, Blake, thank you for coming on the show and sharing this. And congratulations on kicking off that entitlement elimination program. I think that's amazing. And I may buy it for my granddaughter. So
Yeah,
I think it's
thank you.
incredible. Blake, listen, you come off so polished and professional. If I was listening, I'd want to get in touch with you. Tell us the best ways to reach out to Blake.
Yeah, so if it's law firm, trust related stuff, estate planning stuff, my firm website is trustedepa.com, as in Trusted Estate Planning Attorneys. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and then the family bank stuff and entitlement elimination, that's yourfb.com.
Fantastic. Blake, thank you for coming in the show. We appreciate your time, and more importantly, I appreciate you saving my family a year in probate. So thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for checking out Own the Room with Jake Stahl. If you've gotten value from this episode, share it with the solopreneur in your life who wants to know how to communicate to be seen, heard, and respected. Review and rate the show wherever you check out podcasts, and grab your copy of Own the Room, How to Communicate to be Seen, Heard, and Respected. We'll catch you next week on Own the Room.